This is terrible, boys. This video was not supposed to be this way. You see, over a month ago, we talked about an exotic, a long-lost, forgotten hand cannon that no one really gave a damn about. But the biggest crime out of all of this was that statistically, Crimson was the best. It had beautiful stats with the exotic catalyst at a whopping 93 range and 97 stability. This thing should have been amazing, but it wasn't, and we made the suggestion that Bungie gave it a buff, which they have. Crimson is doing a hell of a lot more damage inside of Crucible at a whopping 30.5 per crit and 19 per body. Now these numbers are rounded, which is why inside of Crucible you see 31 per crit and 20 per body. Now regardless of whichever one of these numbers is actually right, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, this exotic is still trash. Somehow, some way, this pulse rifle hand cannon wannabe is still just as bad as it was pre-Shadowkeep. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go the extra mile and say it's worse now, despite receiving a 20% buff here. And it all boils down to one thing that has affected all of our hand cannons, and that is the range nerf. The range nerf. When I was at Bungie 2 weeks ago, like the first question I asked was, what kind of range nerf are we looking at? And I was told hand cannons were not receiving a range nerf. Instead, their damage fall off would be steeper, meaning the range of Crimson, which was previously at 34.5 meters, was supposed to stay the same, or at least that was the way I understood it, and that the change was going to greatly affect the damage fall off outside of it, meaning it was going to be much steeper. So instead of having this nice linear 1 damage drop off per meter or half a meter, that damage would just bottom out. But I was okay with that, because that still meant that my Crimson here was still gonna have good damage all the way up to 34.5 meters. Currently, right now, in Shadowkeep Sandbox, Crimson at 93 range experiences damage fall off at 27.5 meters. That is a 7-meter reduction, which may not seem like a lot to you, but it is extremely substantial. It's the kind of change that can kill all exotic hand cannons overnight. And the reason why I say it can kill all exotic hand cannons, normally in these situations, there is a blanket nerf that is applied to hand cannons, and it's specifically aimed at hand cannons with rangefinder and max range stats, aka spare rations or all-stringer. Both of those hand cannons can roll with rangefinder, ricochet rounds, a range masterwork, all kinds of things that allows those hand cannons to reach very great lengths. When you go into these kind of sandbox changes, you cannot blanket nerf them, because essentially what ends up happening when you give the same type of treatment to all of our hand cannons across the board, you're going to be looking at a Rise of Iron scenario where all of our exotic hand cannons, Hawkmoon, Thorn, and Last Word, completely dropped off of everybody's radar for the most part, because weapons like IS Luna and Palindrome were the much better options. And that was simply because everything that was designed to nerf the range of hand cannons was purely to rein in those other hand cannons. I would have just rather legendary hand cannons in general not roll with rangefinder, if that is what we're truly trying to rein in. But this hand cannon, with the range stat that it has, should not be experiencing damage fall off at 27.5 meters. Despite this hand cannon having great traits with something like Cruel Remedy that allows for it to heal the wielder, and of course the ability to refill the magazine upon precision kills, despite the weapon having god tier stats with an exotic catalyst to boot, despite all of those things, Crimson is somehow worse than what it was before. Yes, it's doing more damage, approximately 22% more damage, which is very nice, but this overall nerf to range on hand cannons has specifically dialed in on Crimson and has affected it way too harshly. At no point, even if the hand cannon was stretching to 34.5 meters, would I say Crimson would have been overpowered, even at 31 per crit. It's still a burst fire weapon. It still requires you to hit all bursts, and it's still going to take more than 2 bursts to get a kill, which is essentially 0.97 seconds. The TTK value was not going to increase, and there's already some other funky stuff about this hand cannon. Number one, the rate of fire is not exactly correct. It's actually 386 rounds per minute. We've discussed this before, but I'm not getting into that. The point is that you cannot handle hand cannons this way, or really any weapon this way. When you're trying to rein in something specifically, you got to think about the exotics, especially when you start applying blanket nerfs like this. cannons. And on top of that, I've been completely bamboozled because I was told that there was not going to be a ranged nerf for our hand cannons. Instead, we were going to be looking at a damage fall-off curve being much steeper. Maybe there's a communication issue, but this is not the way to handle Crimson, and I can think of so many weapons that can perform better than Crimson. And considering that it's only good from 27.5 meters and below, well, now you're starting to step into territory that is already being ruled by a weapon, Recluse. Tell me how we can issue a blanket nerf to hand cannons in such a way, but Recluse still has the range that it has. It's not good, fellas. Crimson is terrible. It's just as bad as it was, if not worse. We'll be going through all the different sandbox changes. Hand cannons overall have been nerfed in terms of range. They do feel better in terms of recoil, but range-wise, they are not as effective. For some hand cannons, I think this is perfectly acceptable. And like I said, all stringer, spare rations, completely acceptable to bring them in line. But the result is the rest of our hand cannons getting wrongfully hit in the mouth. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.